In this video, I'm testing out the Bar A BBQ cold smoked brisket method. Will it save you time and produce a smokier brisket? We're gonna find out in this video, so let's get smoking. Bar A BBQ has an interesting method of smoking their briskets. They smoke them for around 5 or 6 hours at 180 to 200 degrees, super low temps in the barbecue world. Then they bump the temps up to finish them in the morning. The reason they do this is really time saving. They can put their briskets on at 3 in the morning, add some charcoal to the firebox with some bundled wood, light a bit of the charcoal, and then they can leave, get some sleep for the next 5 or 6 hours while that fuel in the firebox slowly smolders away at a low temperature, unattended, come back in the morning and then bump the temps up and finish their briskets. But presumably it also makes their briskets smokier because the lower temperature you smoke at, the more smoke you get. To find out if it actually works, I'm trimming up this choice grade brisket, probably lower choice grade by the look of it, not a lot of fat marbling, just zipping off the sides, trimming off a bit of the fat cap, rounding out the flat, and I flip it over. I'm now seasoning it with some Smoke Trails BBQ brisket rub available on my website, smoketrailsbbq.com or Amazon, and finishing it with a bit of Southern Dutch barbecue, all-time classic. Really like this stuff. They do really well in the American Royal Rub contest every year. Now heading out to my Oklahoma Joe's offset, Cooper from Bar A Barbecue uses Matchlight charcoal for this. I'm just using regular Kingsford briquettes, and then I'm adding a bundle of wood splits on top of that charcoal. I did that right before I went to bed. I did not get up at 3 a.m. in the morning. I just got up first thing in the morning and lit up one side of the charcoal underneath the wood. Then I closed down all the dampers. This is kind of like the minion method. If you've ever heard of that method for like a Weber Smoky Mountain, you pile in a bunch of briquettes, then you light one edge of it, choke off the airflow, and it slowly lights the other briquettes over time like a fuse and produces low temperatures unattended for a long period of time. We're kind of doing that here in this circumstance, but we're using charcoal and wood splits. Now the brisket goes on. You can actually just put the brisket on before you light up the pit, and we're going to let it roll at around 200 for around 5 hours, hopefully. Here's what the smoke looks like. Not super clean, but not super dirty. Turns out it did not last 5 hours. I had to add more charcoal and wood after just 2 hours, so I don't think you'd be able to get 5 hours unattended in a smaller offset like I'm using, but maybe you could if you really loaded up the firebox with a lot of charcoal, a lot of wood, and really closed down the dampers and let that fuse slowly burn over time, but you might get quite a bit of dirty smoke doing it that way. Now you can see all the smoke coming out of the smoker, very smoky. 5 hours later, the brisket looks like this. Not as dark as I thought it would be, but it's getting pretty dark, and it's around 116 degrees internal, kind of par cooked or par smoked, but still a long way to go. I'm now bumping temps up to 275, and I'm adding my control brisket at this point. This is the brisket that I'm just smoking like normal without any cold smoke. 6 hours later, the control brisket and cold smoked brisket are at around 165 to 170 degrees. Obviously, the cold smoked brisket had a bit of a head start, so it's a little bit higher. I'm foil boating both of them now and returning them to the smoker. This isn't part of Bar A's method. Their method is really just the cold smoke part, and then they finish it at a higher temperature. But I like to do the foil boat, and then I like to hold the brisket overnight. So I don't think that's going to make that big of a difference for the purposes of this experiment. The real thing to focus on is that extra 5 hours we tacked on to the beginning where we did the cold smoke. Okay, bumping temps to around 300 degrees now. 12 hours in, the briskets are around 195 internal. So I'm wrapping them in foil with some ghee, which is basically like clarified butter. Just add some fat to help them cook and retain moisture, and putting them in my holding oven at 150 degrees Fahrenheit for 18 hours. The next day, I'm clearing some space with the clearing stick and getting ready to taste these briskets. I'm pretty excited. We got our control here, and we have our cold smoked brisket here. I'm gonna smell them first because that's usually where I can pick up on whether one is smokier than the other. So I'll smell the control first. Pretty smoky. Whoa. I can immediately tell that the cold smoked brisket is a lot smokier than the control brisket. Wow. Yeah, that's just firing the nostrils on all cylinders on the cold smoked brisket compared to the still smoky control brisket where I did my normal long hold method, but this one is noticeably smokier according to my sense of smell. So I'm going to slice into the control now. I'll give you guys a look there, nice and juicy, no issues so far. Slice off a couple of point slices here. Oopsies. Take that one, I'll take that one. Okay, got my slices ready for the control. Slice into the cold smoked brisket now. Just touching the flats. The flat on the cold smoked brisket seems a little bit drier, a little bit tougher, but this looks pretty juicy. Looks pretty much as juicy as the control brisket. Nicer slices on that one. That has nothing to do with the method I use, just a nicer brisket. Okay, we've got our cold smoked samples here and we have our normal samples here, so I'll give them a taste. Okay, a little bit of smokiness. Now for the cold smoked brisket. Okay, I just tried a whole bunch of different samples all over these briskets, and I confirmed my original assessment that yes, the cold smoked brisket is definitely smokier than the brisket that I did using my normal method. The cold smoked brisket has more smoke flavor and also different types of smoke flavor. In certain bites that I had, it reminded me of when I used to smoke on my Masterbuilt electric smoker. That's the very first smoker I started out on, and because you get very low smoldering temperatures in an electric smoker, you don't get full combustion. You get these flavors that are on the lower end of the combustion spectrum that you don't really get when your fire is on fire, for lack of better words, and at a higher temperature. So more and different types of smoke flavor on the cold smoked brisket, but in some of the bites I had, it was leaning towards the sort of dirty smoke territory. Again, from my experience on smoking on an electric smoker, if you overdo it or you use a pellet tube or a pellet tray on your pellet smoker for way too long, you get those acrid type acidic flavors. And there was a little bit of hint on the cold smoked brisket of those flavors. Barely noticeable. I don't think a normal person would pick it up, but because I have trained myself to kind of look for those flavors, I kind of picked them out. So you are getting some flavors on the dirtier smoke side of the spectrum, but you're also getting some really good flavors from the lower end of the combustion spectrum that are really good. All of those delicious phenols that come from lower combustion temperatures. The big question is it worth it to extend the time of your cook to get that extra little layer of smoke flavor? That is really up to you. The briskets that I cook are smoky enough for me, smoky enough for my guests. My guests have never asked me for more smoke flavor, but if you really love smoke flavor, the cold smoke method is definitely the way to go. What about practical considerations? Well, Bar A BBQ invented this method not really to add more smoke, or not for the sole reason of adding more smoke to their brisket. It was because they wanted to get home earlier so they could get more sleep, spend more time with family. So they would put their briskets on the smoker at 7 p.m., let the cold smoke method kind of par cook the briskets and par smoke them, and then they show up at 3 in the morning at the restaurant to cook the brisket the rest of the way, and it already has a head start when they get to work. For backyard cooks like us on smaller offset smokers, I don't really know if that's gonna work, because from 7 a.m. to 3 a.m. in the morning, there's a 5 or 6 hour stretch. Is your smoker gonna maintain sub 200 degree Fahrenheit temperatures with lots of smoke for 5 to 6 hours on a smaller offset smoker? It's gonna be tough. You'll probably have to set up some sort of minion method where you have charcoal with wood chunks and you just light one end and it slowly burns. But theoretically, if you really dialed it in, you could get it to work. I personally prefer the way that I did it. Get everything set up in the firebox the night before, get your brisket seasoned in the fridge. First thing you do when you get up in the morning at, let's say, 7 a.m. is you throw the brisket on the smoker, light that fire, close down the dampers, get it to around 200 degrees Fahrenheit, go and carry on with your day, monitor the temperatures and add wood or charcoal as necessary. Open and close your vents to keep that 200 degree temperature going with lots of smoke. Do that for 5 hours and then start bumping up your temperatures. And you should be done around probably 10 a.m. at night at the latest, and then you hold it overnight at 150 degrees Fahrenheit and it's ready really anytime the next day. That's the way I prefer to do it, because then I don't have to lose any sleep by staying up late or getting up early on the morning. I just cook the brisket on Saturday between the hours of 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. and then go to bed, and the next day my brisket is done. It's in the holding oven whenever I want to take it out. You can use whatever you want to hold it. You can use your oven. I've heard of people using turkey roasters. You can use a sous vide machine. You can buy a really inexpensive holding oven. So that's the way I prefer to do it, and you can definitely do the cold smoke method with that method. If you guys have any other ideas for videos you'd like to see on the channel, let me know in the comments section below, and until next time, happy smoking.